Alright, so let's graph tangent functions. I have this tangent function. Let's break it down. First thing, what's my midline? Well, my midline is 0. It's the the x-axis would be your midline because there's really nothing added right there. Alright, next piece, my vertical shift. There's no amplitude on a tangent. It's a vertical shift, is like what to call it. So it's just that number in front. We'll call it 2. 2 vertical shift. You'll see in a second how that plays. Next one is period. Well, period on tangent is not 2 pi divided by b. It's pi divided by b. Now, what is b? Well, if you look at this carefully, your b is 1/3. So what we got here is this is going to be pi divided by 1/3, which is pi times 3/1. So your period for this particular problem is 3 pi. Before we start sketching this, let's think about generally what tangent looks like. Tangent always starts kind of like a sine graph at 0, 0, and then the period away is the end of it. Down the middle of those two dots is an asymptote, and then the function goes up like this and like that. That's the general look of it. And the dots that are going to be important, there are going to be 2 dots right here, and those come from your a value, which is your vertical stretch. So that's what it's going to look like. So for mine, I'm going to put a dot right there. And my next dot is going to be the end of the period, which the period is 3 pi. So I'm going to put the end of my period all the way here at the end, 3 pi. You could put 3 pi wherever, since I haven't chose my markings yet. So I have these 2 dots, are those right there, beginning and end. Right down the middle will be an asymptote. So it looks like here would be in the middle. So I have an asymptote right there down the middle. All right, next, halfway between this dot and the asymptote, which is right here, you are going to be going up your a value. So my a value is 2. So right here, you're going to be going up 2. Now, I'm going to go by 2, so I'm going to call this 2, 4. So my a value right there would take me 2 up right there. So my graph will have a look like that and go up against the asymptote. All right. Now, between this asymptote and this dot right in the middle here, we're going to be going down 2. So again, this is -2 here, so I'm going to go down 2. So it's going to go through that dot and up next to the asymptote, just like that. And that would be a sketch of my tangent graph. Now, something I want to do real quick. What would be the equation of that tangent line? That's kind of important. Well, wouldn't that tangent line be halfway to 3 pi? So what is half of 3 pi? Hopefully you see that's 3 pi over 2. That's kind of important to know the equation or where asymptotes are. So you have to be able to know it's halfway there. All right, next one, let's do this one. Let's find my midline amplitude, my midline vertical shift in period again. So my midline for this one is y equals, looks like -1. Right there is my midline. And actually, let's draw that on real quick. So my midline is -1. So let's draw that midline on, because everything's based upon that. This is kind of the middle of my whole entire graph. Alrighty. Next, my vertical stretch is going to be this number in front, which would be a -1. Or you could say it's 1 with a flip. It's your call. And my last piece is my period. Your period is always going to, for a tangent, going to be pi divided by b, and your b looks like 2. So pi over 2. So let's put these dots. Tangent always starts here. Remember, starts and ends with the asymptote down the middle. Now, my period is pi over 2. Now, I could put pi over 2 over here, but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to make it really easy. Since you always, whenever you draw a tangent, it's kind of in quarters. First quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. I'm just going to break it into quarters. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to call that pi over 2. So right here, I'm going to call it simply pi over 2. It's a little bit easier than going all the way over here. Let's just go 1, 2, 3, 4. So between these 2 dots is an asymptote right there. So let's stick that asymptote right there. Boom, boom, boom. my asymptote. Awesome. Okay, halfway between these, we're going to go down 1. All right, so just remember it's called that -1, -2, because it's -1 because we already made that -1 from the midline. So anyways, because of -1, we're going to go between these, we're going to go down 1. So I have a dot right there, down 1. And between these two, I'm going to go up 1, the opposite. So I'm going to go up 1. And then we graph our tangent curve. And it looks something like that up against the asymptotes. Okay. Sweet. We just graphed it. So that right there is our tangent graph. Now, what would be this line right here, the asymptote? Where is that located? Well, what is half of pi over 2? So if I took pi over 2 and multiplied it by a half, that would be pi over 4. So this asymptote is pi over 4. It's good to be able to write that, label that. Now, one last piece. With tangent, I want you to notice something. When you make tangent, really what you're doing is you're kind of just drawing, this dot, think of this as a dot right there on at the asymptote, and a dot. Do you notice this looks kind of like a sine graph? Look here. Do you notice it kind of looks like a sine graph? So these dots are kind of the same dots as a sine graph. So if that helps you, you could kind of think of this as a sine. After you do pi over 2, not 2 pi over 2, remember that difference, but it kind of looks like a sine graph for getting your dots. That can help you find these specific dots and remind you, where do they go? Think of it kind of as a sine graph.